Nigerians players have arrived home and are boycotting tonight's Africa Cup of Nations qualifier against Libya after being stranded at an airport for over 12 hours. The Super Eagles players and staff flew out to Libya on Sunday night but were diverted to Abraq Airport instead of their original destination of Benghazi Airport, which is over 200 kilometers and 3.5 hours away from where they were staying. To talk about this incident, we've roped in football journalist Emeka Enyadike. Emeka, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, and I hope you're having a good day.
Emeka, let's speak about this situation because we see the Nigerian team and the FA up in arms over what has happened on their travels to Libya. But we also know that we heard similar complaints coming from the Libyan team for that first leg clash, as well as with South Africa earlier in the year with World Cup qualifiers, the team traveling over 8 hours, arriving at the airport and told the airport's now closed, they can't take off to their destination. Let's speak about these incidents because they seem to be somewhat of a regular occurrence.
Yeah, I think what has happened, with this Nigeria-Libya game and also previously with the South Africa game, it's so 1990s. This is the kind of thing that used to happen in the 90s where teams used all kinds of tactics to frustrate their opponents, especially with the rival times. And then you have this scenario where it could be better if there's better coordination and there's very, very specific rules by CAF around how these things are done. It's football on the one hand, but international aviation has its own rules. Sometimes you arrive at an airport. I've been fortunate. I've traveled to out of Africa, 54 countries. I've traveled to close to 50 of them because of one football or sports-related event. And one of the things that I've observed sometimes is that we don't treat ourselves well in Africa. And so when a team is arriving, sometimes we have superstitions. So the visiting team doesn't want to let the home team know when they're arriving because they feel like someone will put something, muti or something somewhere. Sometimes they also they play mind games. But when it has to do with aviation, it's not a football rules, it's about international civil aviation and also national security rules. So you must let your opponents know when you're arriving. Arrangements have to be made, communicated. Sometimes some airports don't open at night. And you want to arrive at night, they will divert you somewhere. But this particular incident seems like a tit-for-tat thing because the Libyans complained last week. I'm from Port Harcourt in Nigeria, where the Libyans and South Africa landed in Port Harcourt when they came. Port Harcourt to Uyo ordinarily without all of the hassles that you have today, which it shouldn't be more than an hour and a half by road, which technically wouldn't be a big problem. But the thing is that Uyo has an international airport. It means invariably that if proper arrangements are made, the flights should arrive. But in some countries, they have civil aviation rules. Usually for charter flights coming in must first land in a major airport, sometimes be Lagos or it could be Port Harcourt, which is a much bigger airport. And in the case of Libya, Benghazi is a much bigger city than where they took them to. So this was clearly a case of Libya trying to pay back Nigeria. And I think it's very distasteful. It takes us really, really back to the 90s because this was what used to happen to African teams and clubs going to play in Africa. And I think it's it's condemnable on all counts. But it doesn't matter whether it was Nigeria who did or Libya, but now we have a scenario where a game is not being played. And to be fair to the players, you can't keep players in the airport for 15 hours and expect them to play a game the next day. It doesn't make sense.
I think you're so right in what you say, Emeka, that irrespective of the direction that it happens, it shouldn't be allowed to happen. As you mentioned, that Libya did have similar concerns last week going into their encounter, and now it's almost a tit-for-tat situation. But let's speak to the possible sanctions we could see coming out of this, because the Nigerian team has said that they will boycott that qualifier tonight. What could possibly be the outcome of this? Do they then forfeit the 3 points of the encounter? Does Libya instead, as a FA, get some sanctions imposed on them? What do we likely see happening in this scenario?
Well, I think what will happen is CAF will investigate, but the reality is that I personally do not think that it makes sense for the players to go and play a match after what they went through. And also remember that there are issues with FIFA and European clubs insurance and all of those kind of things. You risk having. I mean, we have like Foster now not playing for Bafana because he got injured. So there are things to consider: the security and safety, and also the health of the players. Very, very important. So getting them to play is one thing. The other challenge that they have is that there are very few international windows available. The window available is only in November, which means that you are not allowed to play 3 games during the international window, which means that this game is now a problem in terms of rescheduling. But the ideal scenario would have been to for CAF to reschedule the game at a later date. But all the qualifiers have to be completed in November so that they'll have the draws for the AFCON done in December. Because by the next international window in March and June next year, there is the World Cup qualifiers which have been suspended, which have to continue. So finding a date for this game would be a problem because clubs won't, most of the players for Nigeria play in Europe, in fact, all of them play in Europe. And a few in South Africa, maybe 2 of them in South Africa. So the question is, where do you find the window? Because FIFA has clear international windows. There's one every month for the months of September, October, November, and none in December. So scheduling this game will be difficult, and it has to be done by the end of November. Otherwise, you can't get the teams qualified for AFCON. So it's a very, very tricky scenario and something that we have to fix in Africa. We keep shooting ourselves in the foot because the media coverage for this is a disgrace, not just to any one African country, to all of us in Africa, because it paints a very bad picture and fits into the narrative and stereotype that we are incompetent, we cannot manage our game. And I think it's, for me, I have followed the game a long time, and this is very despicable.
Indeed it is. Well, Emeka, thank you so much for your time this morning. We'll just keep our ears on the ground and see what the outcome will be then from CAF's disciplinary board, who are currently investigating the matter. That is, of course, Emeka Enyadike, who is a sport journalist, joining us to speak about the happenings out, of course, in Libya, where Nigerian team had traveled to play the Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. They do currently at the moment sit at the top of their group, but tonight they have said that they are boycotting the game. We will keep you updated on what that outcome is after CAF has attended to its investigations.